Hi, this is Sandy. We're starting a new section in our art lessons and we're going back to the basics of watercolor. So many times I see in the forums about people making mud and they don't know how they're making mud. But mud can have a lot of different definitions in a watercolor world. So let's get started.
Okay, we are going to talk about mud. And it's not the mud that you go outside and you mix water and dirt. But mud is pretty muddy looking. It no longer looks like dirt and it no longer looks like water, but it just isn't very exciting. Well, the same thing happens in our paints. And in our paints, there are many ways to make mud. It's through understanding how you made mud that you can avoid making mud. So we're going to start off with bubbles, because bubbles are very small and easy to control. I have a lid top, and I'm going to go around the lid top so I know where my bubble begins and ends. This is where I'm working. I'm going to choose two colors, and I'm going to try and figure out exactly how I'm making mud. This is only one way out of many that you could be making mud. First off, we have dirty water. This is the water we rinse our brush in. Then we have clean water. This is the water that we want to be using on our bubbles, because if our water is dirty, our colors are going to start out completely dirty. Then we're going to pick two colors, and I'm going to pick colors that I know will mix and make mud, or gray or brown, one of those colors. So those are the complementary colors. If you go back to the color wheel classes or videos that I've done, they are explained more. But for our purposes today, they are blue and orange together, purple and yellow, and green and red. I'm only going to choose two. You choose the colors you want to work with, the colors you think you make the mud the most. On both bubbles, I'm going to get the bubble wet on the inside. When I get the bubble wet, I'm going to wait until I don't see any puddles of color. It's the puddles of color that sometimes give us a problem. Now, I see a sheen on my bubble, and that's what I want to see. So first I am going to make mud. I want to get a little bit more around the edge. And my colors here are pretty dry because I have not painted in weeks. So I'm going to pick the blue and the orange. So here's a blue that I'm going to pick, and I'm just reaching in here. It's sort of a blue-green, but it'll be okay. And I'm going to put it in here like this. And I'm really not polka dotting. I'm just dropping it at the edge. Okay? That works. If I wanted to, I can lift up this page and you can see it running. All right, now I'm going to rinse my brush out. That's the dirty water I'm doing it in. Then I'm going to reach in for the clean water, and I'm going to find the orange I'm using, and I'm going to mix it in here and get it nice and smooshy. And now I'm going to drop the orange right along the outside of the line, and I'm going to pick it up. Get a little more right here where I missed. Rinsing out my brush, and then I'm going to lay my brush on its side so that it isn't in the water and it's not running down into the brush. Now I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to let the colors run. Okay, they aren't running quite right. So I'm going to just add a little water just because I know I can. Let's see what happens next. Oh, that isn't doing what I want. Okay, let's try going this way. Yeah, I can go this way. Now I'm going to go back this way. And I'm going to turn it this way. And notice I am really running these colors together. Oh, it's not running very well. I think I'm going to add some more water up here. Okay, now it's starting to run. All right, it's running. It's running. I'm letting it run, which is really what I want to do, but I'm not getting my orange down there. Maybe I need a little more orange up here like that. So I'll drop some more orange in there. Pick up some clean water. Oh, let's go back the other way. Oh, let's go down this way. Oh, let's go over here. Oh, let's go over here. Oh, dear, I'm not getting any orange down here. So I think I'm going to come up here and I'll put some orange in right there. Rinse out my brush again. So a wash, let's refresh our memories, is just colors on water going back and forth. Okay, it's getting pretty ugly. It's really getting ugly. Oh, that is not doing what I want it to do. Maybe I'll get some blue, some more blue. I'm going to add some more blue up here. It's just not looking the way I want it to look. You know, you get an idea what you think it wants to look like, and then it doesn't look like it. So you keep playing, and you keep adding more color. Oh, that isn't working. Oh, that's getting pretty. Oh, this is what we call mud. I have overworked this to death. There's little to no color on it that is recognizable. So what did I do wrong? I would say the first thing I did wrong is I kept adding more color to it, and then more water, and then more color. So already when I started, I was overworking it. I lost all of the real orange, and I lost all of the real blue. I've ended up with, what have I ended up with? I'm going to reach in here and grab some. And I've ended up with that color right there. That's gray. That's the complement mixing. Kind of grayed it all out. So you might think, I can fix this. I can rescue this. This is my masterpiece. And I want to get some more orange in there. So I'm going to reach into my orange and I'm going to add more. But have I fixed it? Is this fixable once I get mud? Nothing you do is going to fix mud. You can just make more mud. So let's talk about the right way to do it. Okay, remember we started out with a damp bubble. You might ask, why am I using bubbles? Aren't you a bit tired of bubbles? But this bubble is very controllable. By using this, we've limited our space of our workspace, and we know we can handle this size of a space. Okay, now let's go back to that orange, pick it up, and I'm just putting it at the edges, letting the water do its job. I'm controlling the mix. I'm rinsing my brush. I'm going to pick up that same blue that we used before, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pick up the other side. Rinsing my brush, getting some clean water on it. Now I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to let it run gently into that orange. Now you see it, there isn't a lot of movement there, so I do need more water. But I'm just going to add it at the edge here. I'm not going to put it all over. I'm going to move it this way. When I get to this point, I see a water spot that I didn't hit. I can add more water here, but you know, it's almost better to let it work itself out. I'll quit working it out. Okay. When I finish with my colors, I want a cross between these two colors. So I'm stopping here. My wash is telling me I'm going to get some beautiful color going. And I have to let the colors work. I can't overwork the colors. All that tilting I did there totally mixed it way too much. This is a wash that I'll be able to use. So now I want to do a wash, and I'm going to use that same orange and I'm going to use that same blue. When I paint a painting and I know what I want to paint on it, I want to position it in a certain spot. And I'm going to use the wash as the background, so I don't have to paint a background in after I paint my picture. Sometimes that doesn't work very well. Now, one way to go and work in a larger piece of paper or a larger area is to get a bigger brush. I could go get a bigger brush, but I know a lot of you don't have a bunch of brushes, so I'm going to use the same size 10 brush that I used for the bubbles. Now I am going to go ahead and I'm going to get, this is called a wet in wet wash. And I'm going to get my paper nice and damp. Not really sopping wet because I don't want it to bubble or buckle. But there's just something for that pigment to get into. And that's all I'm going to do right here. Now I'm going to go, and I'm going to start with blue since it's right here. I'm going to pick up some of that blue, same blue we used up there, and I'm just going to lay it down here. I might need a little more water. And I might want to pick it up and let it run. And I'm going to pick up some more water and let it run basically to the middle of the paper. At this point, I could even just drop a couple of pieces of water. Got to be careful how much water you drop. Don't want that way too wet. Okay? I'm letting it run. Now I'm going to turn my paper around so I can work on the other side. My clean water here. I've got a little bit of blue, but it isn't going to be matter too much. And I'm not going to allow this water to mix with this water yet. That's kind of wet. That's the way I want it. They aren't mixing. That's good. Now I'm going to go back to that orange. This is really a brilliant orange. And I'm just laying the color in. I'm not really covering all that space. And I'm going to let it run opposite this side. Okay, now we got that. It's running, and it's not running enough, so I'm going to rinse out my brush so I don't get my clean water dirty, and I'm just going to add some water. You can see where the water isn't going to run because it doesn't have a water path to go. So I've got clean water in my brush. I'm going to lay it back down, and I'm going to connect the two. And I'm going to let it run, and I'm going to pick it up and let one run into the other. I'm sort of running in a diagonal too. Now I'm going to let this blue come over there. See that up there? Leave it alone. It's fine. I'm going to keep doing this until I feel that looks pretty good. And I'm going to keep just turning it, but being careful that my fingers don't get in the paint. Okay. My wash is done. You see these white spots right there? At this point, whoops, I dropped water on my paint. At this point, I can come in with a damp brush. You can make your brush damp by just running it along a paper towel like that. Okay, and I can just make little lines to give it a place to run in there. Just one or two, just so I don't have a totally white spot. And I'm going to leave it alone. Well, maybe I'm not going to leave it alone. Let's go ahead and let's give it a pop of water right there. How'd I do that? I got some wet water and I popped my brush. Let's let it run a little bit more. I know by my bubble that if I mix back and forth, it's going to get muddy because that's what our bubble did when we did that. But let's let it work now. Lay it flat, and we are going to use this. Okay, my painting is not dry. I can tell it's not dry because I can see a sheen in the light. Although this is getting kind of dry up there, so I can't do it up there. Once it's dry, we can't do anything to this. But this up here is wet enough. I can take dry water or clean water. I can then get a little bit of orange on my brush. See that? It's wet. And I can just tap it with my finger like this. You know, that blue was very blue. This is going to give it a couple spots where it isn't quite so blue, orange. This is introducing that orange into my wash. Remember, once this is dry, and it is pretty dry, it isn't like this up here, and I'm doing this, but I don't want you to do it to ruin your wash. If I go like this here, you can see where my finger has touched. If I do this here, you really can't see it. So that's, you know that this is too dry to put anything on. However, I can put water, and the water is going to force the pigment out of the center. This right here is called a bloom. Some people call it cauliflower. A long time ago, artists hated, or watercolorists hated the blooms, and they strived to not use blooms. Today's watercolors, they use blooms to their advantage. So if that's how you get something like that, it was semi-dry and you added water. So let's let this dry and then we'll talk about it. So now we're going to analyze our mud. Mud happens a lot when you are working on wet, and you just keep mixing your colors. The colors lose their individuality and they just merge together. When I mix the colors on the palette, I get this color. But when I put it in the water and let it mix together and I overmix it, I know I can find this color in there, but it isn't all the same color. I've made mud, but I didn't make this kind of mud. So we need to know what our paint is going to do. I used CAD medium or CAD orange, and I used phthalo blue on this. Not normally two colors that you would mix together. It's important to know what your colors do when they mix together. A long time ago, I took the colors that I really liked in my palette, and I just created a color chart. It's a good idea. I know what happens when I mix pink opera with Daniel Smith yellow deep, but there's a problem that I did here. I mixed it on my palette. You can get to know your colors by taking just water and then taking the color, the orange, dropping it in here, rinse your brush, go back to your phthalo blue, and put it at the other end. Just to make sure it's a good clear color there. There we go. Rinsing my brush in my dirty water, laying it down, and now you make it mix. You're going to get a truer, and I'm only going to do this once, like that. You're going to get a truer idea of what happens when this color mixes. Then, if you mix it on your palette, as I did here, it's just getting to know your colors. So now let's look at our wash that we did. The wash right here, it worked very well. But I wanted to show you what happens when it's almost dry, the sheen has gone off the paper, and you dropped water onto it. You got blossoms, or cauliflowers, some people call them. And if you go in and you try to correct it right then, it's not going to work because the water just keeps pooling and adding, and you're creating a mud. Then I wanted to show you what it looks like if I drop the orange in, and you can see some of it did cauliflower a little bit because it was the color I dropped in was wetter than the color on the paper. But it woke up that blue. It made it look interesting. One way to correct a cauliflower or a blossom, if you don't want it, is to go in with a damp brush. I've wiped my brush off a couple of times and just smudge a little bit between the two. It'll take some of that away. Now, there's some reasons I wouldn't want a cauliflower. Like if I were doing a portrait on a face, I wouldn't want to see a cauliflower happen, a blossom happen. But there are other times when I embrace that. I want to really show it off. And maybe I will take a color and I will just wet it with water here. And I'm going to take some more of that orange and I'm going to drop it in the corner and let it blossom out on its own. I've called attention to that. So there's reasons you can use that. I've made it look almost 3D right there. So this is the first way to make mud. Just plain over mixing. When would I want to see mud on my paper? when I am trying to make rocks. This makes a beautiful rock. So get to know your colors, and I want you to practice making mud. Sometimes the only way you can learn how not to do something is to try to do it. So make some mud this week.